3, TJ from Las Vegas. Welcome, TJ.
Dana.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Dana. I'm listening to on channel 248 Pluto.
Woo!
And watching, too.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. My thing is, as we sit at home, all of us, and we're sequestered, there are unknown amount of people that are walking around the streets day and night. And my feeling is that they're not being watched or taking, and nobody's taking swabs to find out whether they're infected. And it's time to clean up this type of thing, because I don't think it's a coincidence that the places that have the highest amount of people that are infected also have the highest amount of vagrants in their populations.
Well, I think that there is, and I appreciate you calling in, TJ, and I hope you're keeping safe and healthy. I think we also need to keep the homeless population in our mind, whatever, and keep an eye on those who are homeless, because, if you would have that virus kick off in those communities, my gosh, it would spread like wildfire. And again, go back to second century Christians. They went where people wouldn't. We got to keep that in mind. Whole Foods employees are staging a nationwide sick out. They're striking today because the Amazon subsidiary, they said, failed to prioritize their safety throughout all of this. So a bunch of them have called in on sick leave. And I noticed this very interesting story too that came from one reporter in New York. The Amazon distribution center in New York is going to be investigated by the city over allegations that a worker was fired for raising health and safety concerns when they were doing a strike during a pandemic. And that's the only place that a lot of people can even get stuff. So I think that should be added in for some perspective. But now here's the question that I have, and I'm not saying one way or the other, again, because I think that you should take care of people, especially when they're the only ones out there delivering stuff during a pandemic. But it's not just Whole Foods, it's also Instacart, and it's a lot. Instacart, they're planning a massive nationwide strike too. This is something that they said that the grocery delivery company won't offer its 175,000 gig workers basic protections. Well, first off, it's gig workers. That's one of the things that goes with it. So hazard pay, hand sanitizer, paid leave for people who have pre-existing health conditions. So first off, I think you need to understand the difference between having a full-time job, a part-time job, and a gig job. You're not going to get certain things when you have a gig job. It's not going to happen. If you would like those certain things, then you need to get the job that offers it, number one. And I think that you can have that opinion even particularly now. However, I do think that if you are a business and your employees are there delivering stuff to people who either have compromised immune systems, etc., I think that you need to be cognizant of that and make sure, again, you can voluntarily take care of your people. And I think it's smart to do that because I think that in turn promotes a healthy business. So I don't know. I mean, I think some people don't understand that a gig economy is literally where you don't have that kind of stuff. I mean, and that's whether it's freelance writing or whatever, right? It is a choice. But I do think with those, and particularly during a pandemic, I think that companies should make that voluntary choice. Well, they were mad because he talked about it. God. Wow. His soundbite lasted, what was that? It was not even 30 seconds, was it? How long was that? It was not even 30 seconds. His soundbite was not long at all. Yeah, it was 29 seconds. So for 29 seconds, the martini swilling, mani-pedi getting, blue check whiners were livid because they had to endure a man's free speech for 0.29 seconds. My gosh. Here's the thing, though. And I have more on this because some of these people, some of these geniuses don't understand this difference between separation of church and state. The media complains Trump's not giving doctors and nurses these masks. And then when a private company steps in, a narrative is destroyed. This is less about, as I wrote on DanaLash.com, less about the media's obsessive bias with all things Trump. And it's more about the socialism that so many of them have for so long championed in their coverage, because it is getting beaten all to hell with this optic. You wanted the national debate on capitalism versus socialism? Well, here it is, right there, and you're forced to watch it because it's actually in person, stepping up on your camera, on your television screens, being funneled into your homes every single day, showing you that the private sector will always, can always, just absolutely irrefutably act faster and better and less expensive and all of it better than the federal government. And that's why they're mad. You have all of these television cameras broadcasting this into Americans' homes across the country. Story after story of private business owners volunteering to help their nation during a time of crisis. These evil CEOs that these people harangue 7 days of the week. And they're talking about how they're keeping their employees working, keeping them paid, all while shifting production for the nation they love. Well, there goes that evil corporation narrative also, right? No government compelled these businesses except again for GM, which means sidebar. Can we stop pretending that the Chevy Volt looked anything like a child's drawing of a car come to life? Thank you. This pandemic has highlighted a terrifying fact for progressives that they don't want to admit. Statism caused this pandemic to spread as fast as it did. And statism is why our response wasn't as fast out of the blocks as we would have liked. That's why they're mad. The only reason that they're telling you that you don't need to wear masks is because they're terrified that you're going to go run out and buy up all of them so that there aren't any for health professionals. And instead of lying to everyone, I wish that people would just be honest about it because masks work. It is moronic to lie to the people and say that masks don't work. It is stupid, it is offensive, and it is a lie. The real reason that they're telling you this is because they don't want a run on them. But regardless, there's a run. It doesn't matter if you tell people or not. People are smart. They're not stupid. They're going to know, oh my gosh, why are we we need to wear masks. By the way, I'm going to pull this up. There was a study on the pandemic and the number of cases, and they were looking at like the mathematical modeling of this, etc., and how Cambridge did a whole thing on face masks they did it was actually something that they began with H1N1, and they discovered, this was back in 2009, oh hell yes, the masks are super effective. There was mathematical modeling. I actually read the study. This was done in 2009, and they were looking at the efficacy of face masks in reducing the spread of novel influenza, and this was H1N1. Oh, they're super, super helpful. Coughing, sneezing. They said that the use of face masks is a logical line of defense. Anything that is transported, water droplets. I mean, it's literally like reading the stuff with the coronavirus. They said, and I quote, the use of face masks is a logical line of defense. CDC said it. Cambridge said it. All these health entities from various different countries. I have links if you would like them. They all said that it was great. And then they're trying to, I think there's some in the federal government that are trying to tell, oh, no, they're not helpful at all. We are not morons. Just be honest. Just be honest. You know, folks, really, we don't want you to run out and buy up all the masks so that the health professionals don't have them. Now, see, that makes sense. You don't have to lie to people because then that makes us not trust you more. And we already have a problem with it. Some of us have like a massive problem with trusting government. So, just saying. So, no one is saying that people who are in the medical industry, who they're on the front line, should not have top priority, right? I mean, no one's saying that they should not be the priority for this. But don't tell people that they're ineffective. Because you look ridiculous. I think at some point you have to know when you're beat. But I also think this, folks, we're going to have people in Congress that are, from time to time, are going to do things with which we disagree. And I have a lot less patience and less grace for those members of Congress who have done this repeatedly, who have repeatedly compromised our rights, or who have indicated that they would fold at a time when we would need them to stand strongest the most, right? And I get the president's mad about it, and I would be too if I was in a pressure cooker like he is. And again, I like people who just let it all out there. But I would caution people You don't want to throw out a stalwart conservative. And if he was coming at this from any other perspective than watching out for and I get it, you're saying that, well, it's also passing this and helping people's watching out for the people. I understand your point. But he's also, in his perspective, watching out for the people. He's watching out for, I mean, we were just talking about this. You realize this bill is a third of our GDP. And I'll tell you this, if we don't cut spending, when we get right again, after we get through this, and depending on how long it goes, you will see some elections, some campaigns in trouble. That's a guarantee. Because it always comes back to the economy. People vote their 401ks. And that's why it's a weird time. We are at a very profound moment in history. So, instead of getting mad at Massie, people should realize, all right, we're disagreeing. He has been a stalwart conservative for a long time. And on many issues, particularly Second Amendment rights. He has been, in many instances, one of very few voices of reason on that. And everyone ought to be very careful about throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. Because you need more people like that than not. There have been many, many times when even certain organizations looked like they were folding. And Massie didn't. So, I appreciate that kind of loyalty where it concerns Second Amendment issues. I appreciate that kind of loyalty where it concerns pro-life issues. And I appreciate that kind of loyalty where it concerns lawmakers looking out for the taxpayer, even during a time when it seems most politically incorrect. Let us not form a rage mob. Go into some more. Brian calling from Missouri on line 5. Brian, welcome to the show. Happy Quarantine Friday.
Hi, yeah, same to you. Good to finally talk to you. So I'm in Southwest Missouri here, a bigger city down in Southwest Missouri, if you call it a bigger city down here. But I have intimate knowledge of both of the health systems here in town. I'm in the emergency services business. My wife is a nurse. Coworker of mine is a nurse at the other hospital. Both nurses this week have been sent home because there's nothing to do. They don't have the patients. The EMS system has dropped about 50% in call volume, and the hospitals are just hanging out. So my point to that is balance. We're not New York City, and you can't use the same tactics that they're using in New York City for Southern Missouri.
Right.
It's just a different world, a different area. And yet we are Greene County, so Governor Parsons has not locked the state down, at least yet. But our county has, and so the county has gone into lockdown. And so we have all of these people. I have friends that have small businesses. Nobody can get out and work, but yet our hospitals were sending nurses home because there's just no need for them.
Right. That is a huge point
very,
that you just made. And we were mentioning that too. This was something that Cuomo had mentioned. And for those who are listening, caller Brian from Missouri is talking about it, works in healthcare, telling us about the lay of the land there. Because New York, I mean, obviously everybody knows Southern Missouri, and Brian, you can attest to this. People don't live on top of each other in Southern Missouri. You know, you're not living in a building with a trillion other people. You know, there's wide open spaces. So it's different. I mean, it's actually easier to distance and to sort of practice that. You can't use the New York City approach to, you know, for Joplin, Missouri, or for Springfield, Missouri, or for Poplar Bluff, Missouri. You can't do that. You just, it's just not going to happen. And what? Let me ask you, Brian. What are people in your area? What do they kind of think about all this stuff? I mean, do they feel as though it's good to be cautious, but do they feel that it's an overreaction?
Yes, that is heavily the thought process around here right now, is that everything is like that. So, you know, it's amazing how people, when this type of thing happens, some of my conservative friends, it's amazing how many of them want the government to shut things down.
Yeah.
They're asking, you know, Governor Parsons, shut this down. Why aren't you doing it? And I'm amazed. Why? I can be an adult myself, and I can keep my family home if I'm concerned. My grandma is fragile. She's in a nursing home. We haven't gone to see her.
Right.
We've told her just stay there, just ride this out.
Right.
We'll call you. We'll check on you.
Right.
She's
Yeah.
fragile.
I feel, because I just saw another headline from Washington Post where they're running defense for China. Listen to this. So in Singapore and Hong Kong, they're reimposing coronavirus restrictions over a second wave of cases because China lied. So I have a little bunch of little headlines here for you. So Sky News reported that the official Chinese communist propaganda outlet, the South China Morning Post, said that Singapore has reintroduced lockdown after reports of a second wave of the WUHAN coronavirus. And Hong Kong apparently also, although I think Hong Kong just never opened its borders. That's the thing. They never relaxed it. They just noticed another increase, but they did apparently order some new restrictions, but they never, as I understand it, entirely lifted their lockdown. And that's because China has lied they've lied about their numbers. They said that they only had like 3,500 people lost, but the thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of urns that are being delivered to like these in Wuhan they're not called incinerators. They're incinerators, but what is the facility where they
crematory?
Thank you. I couldn't remember. A crematorium that apparently like 5,000, and that's like every night, according to one individual who was quoted in a non-communist state publication there, which is probably going to get deleted immediately. The locals in Wuhan, and this is just Wuhan, they actually believe that 42,000 people may have died. 42,000 people may have died because of the Wuhan coronavirus outbreak, not the 3,200 that was claimed by Chinese authorities. Because it doesn't add up. It simply does not add up. And they are I don't believe their numbers at all. I think it is probably 42 something thousand and more. There's no way in hell I believe these people's numbers. But our media does. And our media, because they dislike Trump so much, are eager to just parrot communist propaganda so they can get a dig in on Trump. It's unbelievable. Yeah, they said because 3,000 of those deaths were in the Hubei province. But residents in Wuhan, they said that there were 500 urns that have been handed out to grieving families every day from 7 separate funeral homes that all serve the city. And there's video that they're able to get to upload on Chinese social sites. They said that grieving families that were in a number of different areas in that province, they were told that they would receive their ashes before April 5th. And that was before the, the Qingming Festival, where people go to the graves of their ancestors. So it like over a 12-day period, like there were over 42,000 urns that were distributed. What? So Hobby Lobby quietly reopened stores in last 2 states. Business Insider was discussing how, because people, I guess they want to do hobbies. And as long as stores are if they're doing the social distancing and all of that, I don't have a problem with it. Look, I understand. I realize that we got to have, and not everybody's going to agree, and that's fine. I'm big enough and open-minded enough, and I'm not that much of a wussy to get butthurt if you disagree with me on it. But what I can't handle is people who are like, oh, you disagree. I just can't, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But I get it that you want people to be safe. I understand this. Believe me, I get it. I have a friend right now, a very dear friend, that is dealing with a death in her family because of the coronavirus. And she might now have it, and they're just trying to deal, and their family can't be there for each other because everybody's quarantined. So problems could be a hell of a lot worse than somebody not being able to go to Hobby Lobby. I understand it. But at the same time, I don't think that other people like me, I get it because I hear from you and I talk to you guys, and I can't respond to everything, but I try to as much as possible. And I know that you guys are stressed. I get it. I mean, we all get stressed. It's just the nature of it. This is a disruption of our routine. And as much as I joke about hating people, I mean, we are really social creatures. We are. As much as I hate it, and here's my goth Ali Sheedy side coming out, I get it. We're social creatures and we like our routines. We like to do our thing. You know, I understand that. So it's stressful for everyone. It's hard for full-time working families who have now their kids home and they're trying to make sure their kids are educated while they're also working. And then we have families where, you know, they're not as fortunate as some of us that have both that have all the parents home and all the kids home. Sometimes mom or dad, if they're in healthcare, I have a cousin who is a healthcare worker, and she has to get on her scrubs, put on her face mask, and she's dealing with people who are infected every single day. I understand it. And she has 2 little girls to go home to, one of whom is not even a year old yet. I understand it. Not everyone is as, when you think about how much cabin fever you have and you and your spouse are home together, count your blessings, because some families are not so lucky. Some families, they're out there, they're delivering packages and making sure that some of us get necessary things that we need. They're helping the elderly, they're home care workers, they're doctors, they're collecting your garbage and going around and doing that without hazard pay or anything else. So count your blessings. And with that, I understand that people are worried. I understand that it is seen by others as callous and ridiculous if someone wants to go to church, if someone wants to go to Hobby Lobby, if someone wants to go somewhere. And on that same note, there are people who are just extroverts, and it is stressful for them to suddenly not have anyone to talk to. No routine. No, please do not underestimate the mental weight of that. That is also serious. We're going to have serious problems with anxiety and depression in this country as a result of all of this. It's just a natural. So cut each other some slack and give each other some grace about it. The FDA had authorized a 2-minute coronavirus test kit. And I was reading this and I I'd put it in my rundown, but then I also this morning read this piece from Phil Klein, who was discussing this particular test, and he said the news was reported in a Reuters story that was reprinted by the New York Times and Axios and other outlets. And the Washington Examiner also reported on the supposed development. However, when I thought about writing about this breakthrough this morning, something struck me as odd, he said. So he dug into it. All of the stories eventually led back to a press release that was issued by a company calling itself Bodysphere Inc. Now, I've never heard of that. He's never heard of it either. He writes in here, I've never heard of such a company. Have you guys ever heard of Bodysphere? Nope. It sounds like a fitness ball. Yeah. Bodysphere. It's a ball for your body, and it's spherical. Anyway, he writes, I've never heard of any such company, and all Google searches just referenced the story about the coronavirus test. I then checked the website of the company, and the only products listed were a COVID-19 test, medical masks, hand sanitizer, and all products that happen to be in high demand right now. The company's Twitter page had no tweets before Monday. So then I looked at the FDA webpage announcing the emergency use authorizations, and I did not find any reference to the supposed EUA for the Bodysphere test. So I finally contacted the FDA to ask if any EUA for Bodysphere had been issued, and received an email back explaining no serology tests have received an authorization to test for coronavirus. And they went on to explain that the serological tests measure the amount of antibodies or proteins present in the blood when the body is responding to a specific infection. In other words, the test detects the body's immune response to infection rather than the virus causing the infection, which, sidebar, you would have to do that. Any kind of quick test like that, they're talking about testing people just generally to see if they have any of those RNA copies, but you can't do that unless you also do an antibodies test to see if they've actually been infected. And like when they were infected, so that you would have to do these two things, simultaneously. So anyway, he says that these are less complex and molecular tests, blah, blah, blah. The FDA is not objecting to the distribution of a serology test. What he's saying is basically he called the company number at the bottom of the press release. No one's returned it, but he says it's a hoax. I agree. I think that the 2-minute test you guys have been reading about is BS, because it sounds like it was just put out by somebody who wanted to sell masks and hand sanitizer at an upcharge. So it's total BS. And it is flipping amazing to me that it took him at Washington Examiner that all of these press entities rail against as being a right-wing website, which it's not. Clearly, they're the only ones that are actually researching this crap. But you had Axios, you had a million other outlets writing about this crap. New York flipping Times writing about this as though it was gospel. Because heaven forbid people pick up a damn phone and make a phone call. We have some lazy ass journalists out there. We got some people out there who are like, I'm just going to write from the press release. As long as I don't have to email anyone or pick up a phone and call anyone and get any kind of comment, I'm okay. I don't know if these people are just that introverted, if they're incredibly anxious, or if they are too terrified to interview. I don't know what the deal is, but how in the world are you reporting on this when you don't even try to reach out and get any kind of statement or verification from the entity that is promoting it? This was a guy who was on Martha McCallum's show last night, and he's full of it. This is what started my cranky pants from last night. I want you to play this because this is a doctor who is lying. He was on Fox News, and I could tell Martha wasn't really having it. He's on Fox News, and he was asked about the U.S. Wuhan coronavirus preparation, the death tolls. And as she's going into it, he's like shaking his head in this clip. As she's going into it, he's shaking his head. He doesn't like what she's saying, and then he uses it as an opportunity to bash the United States' preparation. And he lies about something that is so easily disproven. I want you to listen to just her setting this up and then what he says here. Listen.
Large-scale testing. Now, what we hear every night is that there are millions of tests available. And yet we don't have that pinprick blood test that you can just sort of get, at your local doctor and know in 15 minutes. But they're working on it.
Yeah, they're working on it. They should have been working on it for months. So the fact is, we knew about this from the WHO when? December 31st, 2019.
False.
So last year, we knew about this. We
False.
knew coronavirus is coming. We knew it was a respiratory disease. We knew it was person to person.
False. Stop it right there. He says, I knew it was person. They knew it was person to person. Lie, 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 lie. He is a liar. This doctor is a quack. He's a liar. And this is why. They tweeted about it. You want to see the tweet? Go to danalash.com. This tweet that they have up was on January 14th. Well, this is pretty long after December. Yep. And they tweeted, World Health Organization verified. Still up online. Preliminary investigations conducted by the Chinese authorities have found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the novel coronavirus identified in Wuhan, China. So you got this doctor who goes on Fox, and I found this. I saw this online because all the progressives were complaining about the fact that Martha didn't do a follow-up and just dropped him. Why would you keep on a liar? What benefit is that to the viewing audience? I don't want to see somebody lying about something that I've seen with my own eyes. It's false, and pretty much everyone else has too. So she was right. What benefit of that is what benefit to the viewer? You have a guy out there covering China's ass and lying about something that is so, all you got to do is look at the World Health Organization's timeline. And by the way, they were still pushing that talking point all the way up until mid-January. So it's false. And we also know, I have more information about how that's false, because the doctor who suspected otherwise, the person-to-person transmission, who gave his life for this discovery and was persecuted and arrested by his own country because of this, stated weeks earlier than January 14th that he believes that it was person to person. This is also linked to danalash.com. So lie, and lie. I don't want to get into the point where I can't even trust my damn doctor because people are being so political about this. Pick a side. And that infuriated me. This is a guy in the medical community who is on camera murdering your trust, not just in him, but he's using his byline, the doctor, as some sort of authority appeal to get you to believe this Chinese propaganda. There are so many damn people who owe Tom Cotton an apology. It is not even funny. So many people owe that man an apology because Tom Cotton was saying weeks ago that this seems like it is really questionable, the way that it started, the way that it spread. And there's a piece that's over at the Daily Caller right now, and it is from and I think this is Peter Hassan's article, where he gets into this molecular biologist who was quoted by it was Washington Post to rebut the theory that the virus was a bioweapon. And then he ends up telling the guy at Washington Post, actually, it may have leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Is this not what Tom Cotton had said? And everyone was like, oh my gosh, he's a conspiracy theorist. We can't believe Tom Cotton. I do say, that would take yes for $500, Alex. I would believe that. He's a molecular biologist. He's been quoted as a coronavirus expert by the Washington Post, by MSNBC, and he says it's possible that this leaked from a lab in Wuhan. His name is Shi Zhengli. He is the leading virologist on bat-borne viruses in China specifically, and said in March that that's China's leading virologist, said that she lost sleep freaking out about how this could have leaked from her lab in Wuhan after she first learned of this in December. And so now she's telling everyone, she's now telling everyone after she was reprogrammed that are sharing the concerns that she first voiced to, quote, shut their stinking mouths, end quote. Because, see, you're reprogrammed by communist Beijing. But Richard Ebright is saying, no, that still actually is true. He works with chemical biology at Rutgers, and he said, yeah, there's a possibility, absolutely, that this entered the human population through a laboratory accident. And when he was specifically asked if he thinks that it could have leaked from Xi's lab in Wuhan, he said yes. He said denial is not refutation. Is not a refutation. He says especially not a denial based on nature punishing the human race for keeping uncivilized living habits. This is a direct quote. This was something that she told, by the way, she is known as the Bat Woman because she spent 16 years hunting for viruses in bat caves. And she told Scientific American in March that via Daily Caller that she searched for any evidence that her lab's records were mishandled. And she kept thinking, could they have come from our lab? Could that have happened? And so now she's like, no, that's totally wrong. So many people. And media dismissed this. They said, no, this is a conspiracy theory. Media running defense for communist China has prevented us from two things. Number one, properly learning about the origin so that, number two, we could better, more efficiently, and adequately prepare and respond to it. And Cotton pointed out that they were lying, and they were lying. This is not disputable. That communist regime was lying to everyone. They were lying about their numbers. They were lying about the contagiousness. They were lying every single aspect of this. Every single aspect they lied about. Tom Cotton was correct. You are watching, and for all of you J students at home, for all of you conservative teenagers at home that are not going to college right now because you were on lockdown due to a communist regime's idiocy, and this was not them fumbling. I am not convinced that this was just them being stupid communists, stupid sloppy communists that stupidly and sloppily handled something, mishandled it, that went out and infected the world. I don't believe that. That's my opinion. You can have yours. Mike Parson says that he expects the state of Missouri expects the state's social distancing orders to be extended. And this was like before they were officially extended. So he had his daily briefing and he said that he's going to close state parks because there were large gatherings of people in the Missouri parks. So they closed all the parks except for some of the walking trails. You're going to close an outside park? People are shopping at Walmart. You're going to close a park? They're legit like going to Target and buying tampons and milk. You're going to shut the damn park? What is this? I don't get this. I don't get it.
He's doing stuff.
People, you can still go outside, but don't. You know how fun it is to run around your yard? Woo! They're shutting the parks down. You going to put those little sawhorses in front of them? Nope, sorry, guys. The park's closed. The moose out front should have told you. Is that what we're doing? Golly. I mean, that's stupid. This is stupid. This is stupid. Well, people are getting together in the parks. And as opposed to that, so you'd think that by closing the parks, which is literally where the only places that people can really go to get any outside exercise at this point, that's gonna help. How's that gonna work? I don't understand that. And how is that? It's not going to stop people from gathering. If people want to be stupid and show Darwin Awardism, they're going to do it. I read that and I just went, what in the world? Shutting down the parks. So he said, please stay home. You're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to, you're going to be lucky if you can keep people at home till the end of next month. Then you're all going to start having some trouble. People are going to start getting cranky pants. So but closing the parks. I was talking to my husband the other day and I said, probably towards the end of this week, I may have to get, what was it? I may have to pick up, not eggs. I may have to get some whole milk. Because if I do have any milk, which I really don't, every now and then I have a keto cereal and I'll put literally it's a cup of keto cereal and a splash of whole milk in it. It's amazing. And we might have to get some whole milk. And my son, this is at the dinner table, my oldest was like, oh my gosh, can I come with you? And this is a kid who's never, I think the reason, full honesty, that they hate the grocery stores is because when they were younger, as a part of homeschooling, they were in charge of the grocery budget and they had to plan the budget and do the math for all the meals. And so as a result, they hate it. They do not like going to the store. And I'm like, great, I ruined but at least they know how to budget and they know how to do that. They hate going to the store, but at least they know how to do it. I mean, he was so excited. He looked up and he goes, can I go with you? And my youngest goes, are you just going for milk? And I'm like, I don't know if I can take buddies. I don't know if that's how that works. I mean, can you? I don't know. And the fact that I'm even thinking about it makes me mad because I'm so anti-authoritarian. So I think it and then I yell at myself mentally. I'll be like, can I even take a buddy? And then the other part of my brain that's made of American flag and liberty screams at myself what do you mean, can you take a buddy? You can do what you want. And so I have that little person sitting on my shoulder. I have the little cautious Dana over here. And then I have the little person who's basically Joe Exotic sitting on my shoulder. And I'm like, so it's like a field trip to get out. But then when my son saw when I came in from going to the doctor and I was like, stay away from me. I have to decontaminate. I literally yelled this in my house. And I went through my whole thing. And my family was like, because Chris just takes off his shoes and washes his hands. Now he wears gloves, but he's like, I'm not wearing a face mask. I got a beard, I mean, come on. I'm like, yeah, but you should wash it. So I told him he needs to wash his beard every time he comes if he has to go on an errand. Literally all it is picking up medicine. He did go to Home Depot, and that's when he did wear a mask. Because we had to get a new garbage disposal because ours cracked and we couldn't use the sink because it would leak all into this. So we're like, I'm like, I got to be able, So he did that. But he came in and we did the whole decontaminant thing. And my kids were like, this is insane. And I heard my son talking to one of his friends like, my mom makes us Clorox shoes off. And he's like, I'm not leaving this house because the process to just get back in it is ridiculous. And then he goes, do you make Kane and Rachel do this too? And I'm like, well, I'm like, they're not you. And he's like, no. Do they have to do this too? They have to wipe their shoes off the Clorox mat? I'm like, well, I wipe the floor off. Anyway, it was a big deal. Long story short, why the hell are you closing parks? Daily Caller has a Florida sheriff issued an arrest warrant for a pastor who refused to cancel services. It's a Tampa mega church. And they would not close its doors despite a safer at home order in effect in Hillsborough County. Pastor Rodney Howard Brown's Sunday service. So he turned himself in yesterday after Sheriff Chad Cronister and State Attorney Andrew Warren announced an arrest warrant had been issued for charges of unlawful assembly. First off, that's BS. Unlawful assembly is BS. I don't care. Stop. Look, folks. I get it. Everyone wants to be safe. But if you think also that we can go ahead and suspend constitutional rights, even if you are voluntarily staying home yourself and you think that what they're doing is stupid. You got to draw the line somewhere. You got to, guys. It's not a comfortable conversation to have, but sitting here telling someone that that's unlawful assembly is bull. That's bull. And violating the public health emergency rules on isolation and quarantine. He posted $500 bond. He was released 40 minutes later. They had, it's the river at Tampa Bay Church. And they had tried to speak to him on 2 separate occasions about the gathering and about what that was doing in terms of infection rates. Apparently, the command staff went to East Tampa Church. They were told by church leaders and legal staff that Howard Brown would not see them, and he refused to cancel the services. So the sheriff went out and said his reckless disregard for human life put hundreds of people in his congregation at risk, and thousands of residents who may interact with them this week. This is according to Fox 5. They said that, you have technology, you can stream services over the internet. And the sheriff stressed that the warrant was not an attack on religious freedom and noted that there are other Tampa Bay churches that are following the social distancing guidelines set by the CDC. He said he's now concerned whether or not this may have spread following the services. And he said, I was appalled and also frightened that these individuals were thinking that they were doing the right thing. And he actually said this. This is what the state attorney said. I don't know this pastor. I don't know him. I'm going to be honest. I think it's kind of stupid. I mean, you can't, I get it. That we still have our church services. I still watch church and I make sure I tithe. And I think my pastor's pretty logical, even though he doesn't like my Twitter feed sometimes. And he's correct. I think this is, he doesn't seem like somebody that I would listen to. I don't know the man, so I'm just, an immediate, reaction. However, this quote here, this is the quote that got me. It's from it's the state attorney who said, quote, I think it's unfortunate that the pastor here is hiding behind the First Amendment.
What? How do you hide behind rights?
Yeah. One, it's absolutely clear that emergency orders like this are constitutional and valid. Secondly, leaders from our faith-based community across the country have embraced this importance of social distancing. Okay, I don't give a damn what other people have embraced. Really don't care. The idea that you can hide behind the First Amendment is kind of ridiculous. That's just a weird statement. That's a weird statement to me.
But it was there for legal purposes. That's what the First Amendment
Now, there's
is there
certain
for.
things that can happen during a time of crisis and a pandemic. I may know a lot about gun law, but, it's what I understand. I know that there's certain things that you can do, but to sit here and say that someone's hiding behind the First Amendment, and they said the church did not comply, they said that when they were discussing this, his attorney said, we complied with the administrative order regarding 6-foot distancing, and it went above and beyond. And Liberty Counsel, who maintains the church, had hand sanitizer and all of this stuff. And they said it's discriminatory and it's being unconstitutionally applied to the church. So all I know is that there's a pastor who's been, and I don't care if it's a pastor. I don't care if it's somebody at a synagogue. I don't care if it's at a temple. I don't care where it is. If it's I don't care, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, I don't care. It sounds to me like what the pastor was doing and what the church was doing. They were incorporating all of the CDC guidelines about the distancing, and they had another entity there monitoring that for them. And they said that they enforced the rule and they sanitized the facility. The sheriff is pretty hardcore. Obviously, they're going to fight this in court. I don't like the phrase unlawful assembly. I don't like that the state attorney used it. I don't like that it was discussed by the sheriff. I don't like it at all. I don't like that phrase. You're going to try this out in court, and they're going to get their asses kicked, is what's going to happen. And I'm not talking about, excuse the Portuguese, in this ironic, somewhat conversation. But if the state attorney thinks that they're going to fight this in court, good luck with having a political career. you are going to get mauled optically. You will be mauled. And this case is going to be held up as a standard of an attack on First Amendment. Regardless of anything else, that's what's going to come out of it. All the other variables will be forgotten. Now, I will say, and I was noting this, and it was covered in a couple of other places, the 2019 Florida state statutes, they do have the power in a public health advisory to do a number of different things. And the abilities that they have are applicable to this particular situation involving this church and this pastor. But I'm telling you something, you're going to drag a pastor into a court and charge him with quote unquote unlawful assembly? Whew. Man, rhetorically and politically speaking, you better have your pallbearers picked out. I wanted to ask you about this story with the USS Theodore Roosevelt and the USS Ronald Reagan, the only two U.S. aircraft carriers in the Pacific. They've had sailors on both ships test positive for the WUHAN coronavirus. And so now one is back in port in Guam, where they think it might be for a month. And then the Reagan is in port in Tokyo. Is this, I know that some media are saying, I know Daily Mail and others are saying, oh, China's got a free hand. Is that accurate? And does that even, I think they're lying about their figures. So I think that they're dealing with their own crisis right now with this pandemic that they helped kickstart and contribute to the world. So do we need to worry about that? And has that hampered us in that area? Because I know we can't immediately stop worrying about foreign policy issues. All of this stuff can happen concurrently.
Well, there are some reasons to worry. Number one, China has the advantage of being the originator of this in a thoroughly authoritarian government, which doesn't have to value any human life at all. And so they can crank all of their resources for political or other forms of warfare against us and others whenever they want. And so that should concern us. Right. We should be concerned about the size and the strength of our naval fleet. The president invested greatly at the beginning of his administration, and we've made some strides. But that's an investment after a deep hole in the funding for new weapons platforms for some time. And that was when we thought that the war on terror was going to be basically a new form of warfare, and there was willful ignorance about the sustaining rising powers of China, Russia, and others. So if we're going to have multiple trillion-dollar porculus bills going forward, and it sounds like Speaker Pelosi wants more, if a lot of that goes to give our naval fleet an ample supply so that if we get sickness in a densely populated vessel, it can pull off and keep people healthy and what have you, and we're still the biggest, baddest thumping power there is on the Pacific, then I'm somewhat okay with it.
Yeah.
But we have reason to worry if we don't invest in the strength and resilience of our force and capabilities, and if we forget that we're up against the kind of threat that I think more of our representatives and senators have come around to, and maybe more of our public has, but I worry that all the focus on trying to engage in political warfare at home is going to cloud people's perspective that really China did this, and they're not going away. And when we have Governor Cuomo on the same sheet of music with President Trump that we're at war, I'm not saying we're at war with China, but the Communist Party in some ways has been at war with us already, and we need to be wise about that.
Yeah, very wise about it. Whether it's dealing with hacking or IP theft or anything like that. China's been for some time. This has been it just been a threat to national security. Do you agree with when you hear people like Senator Tom Cotton and others now are saying this too, that and now apparently even number 10 over in UK, which I'm finally happy to hear this kind of language coming out of Europe. They're saying that China faces a reckoning. What does that mean to you?
Well, it definitely has meaning to me that maybe not everyone else shares, because I've spent a huge chunk of my life studying and following things China. And I like what Senator Cotton has said. Senator Josh Hawley has been outstanding on this subject matter in recent times, too. And there's the health part of this that matters, but there's the idea of one of the most populous countries in the world being run by an authoritarian liar, and that having economic consequences as well as other strategic consequences. There needs to be a way to make sure that we impose a price on the sovereign that imposed these prices on us.
Yeah.
The taxpayers of the United States shouldn't have to foot these trillion-dollar after trillion-dollar bills. And so that, I think, has to take some effect. But I'd like to hope that in 2020, the voters of America, as they're asking questions of our leaders, keep on the list of questions they put to them about how can we have any kind of a normal relationship with a country like China when it seems so willing to do this kind of damage to us.
Yeah.
And that's, get away from the silly, petty politics of ethnicity and is that racist or whatever else. I mean, we can't afford this kind of criminal blindness that we've had in recent past. And so I'd like to think that even Democrats and Republicans might get some consensus in this.
Yeah, I would definitely hope so. I know China's mad right now because the United States has been insisting that the United Nations call out the Chinese origins of the Wuhan coronavirus. They had a Security Council resolution. It was reported over the weekend, actually Friday, that a resolution on this stalled out because China was mad that that the United States is trying to single them out solely as the country of origin, even though everybody knows that it originated there. At this point, when you see the catastrophic consequence of not just, China's communist ruling, but also their influence on the World Health Organization and the United Nations, do you think that after the United States has brought through this and we stabilize the loss of life and contain the spread of this pandemic further, is it fair to now start, pushing our Congress people to question what in the world we're even involved in these organizations for in the first place? Because aren't they in existence to prevent stuff like this from happening? I honestly don't see the value anymore.
Well, I think that's something that all the sensible people in the world should be getting a sense for at this point. It shouldn't take a crisis like this to make people wake up to the fact of the utter uselessness and ineffectiveness of the UN Security Council, of the World Health Organization. I mean, really, all of the effort that has been done to make any meaningful progress in any of this health crisis has been done by sovereign states alone working with other sovereign states.
Right.
So I would oppose any further pennies and nickels going to this organizations. And the leader of the World Health Organization has been like Baghdad Bob in terms of talking about Beijing propaganda from the beginning.
Yes.
And so why in the world should we pay for that? Give China the full bill for that bogus organization. But for real stuff, it's going to come down to our own sovereign government dealing with other sovereign governments in making any kind of progress on this. And it's not any different when it comes to national security issues. The Security Council hasn't done really anything of use in containing the Iranian nuclear threat, the North Korean nuclear threat. I mean, while we're all focused rightly on fear about the COVID-19 stuff because you can't get away from it right now, the world hasn't stopped, and this story isn't going to stop. And I guess my biggest concern is that when we focus on these shelter-in-place, bend-the-curve kind of arguments, there are entire swaths of the globe that haven't reported hardly any cases. And it's just not logically possible that the continent of Africa is completely blank on this, and that a lot of Latin America is blank on this, that the country of Mexico doesn't have a problem with this.
Right.
And so, we're going to have a long-term struggle with this.
Joining me right now, Senator John Cornyn, who has been in the slap fight of the stimulus all last week. And now, as we are getting ready to go into what the president in his press conference yesterday described as, it's going to be kind of a horrific, was the word that he used, couple of weeks as we test more, therefore we're going to see more confirmed cases, and we will likely see those who have existing health issues. If they contract this, we will likely see fatalities increase. Everybody's been very transparent about it. Of course, we have the new jobs numbers, and today double now from 3 to 6 million unemployed. And in all of this, we're trying to figure out how to navigate our country forward and deal with this increasing hostility from China, this malicious mishandling of this pandemic. Second time that this has happened with them now. And it is on all of these issues that Senator Cornyn joins us from the beautiful Republic of Texas, my state. Senator, always good to have you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Dana.
Of course. So I want to get, first off, I want to get your perspective on what your colleague Senator Schumer was saying in this audio that we played, right, as we were coming into this segment. He's already looking at a fourth wave. He's discussing infrastructure, et cetera. I'm just wondering if that wasn't something that could have maybe perhaps have been handled in the stimulus that was just passed and signed into law. Maybe if they had taken out some of the pork spending and the Kennedy Center stuff and the public radio stuff, maybe that money could have gone towards some of the infrastructure he's suggesting now. What are your thoughts?
No, I think that would have been a much better use of those tax dollars. You know, you see a difference here between people who are trying to solve this public health and economic emergency, which I believe it is, and those who see this as an opportunity to pursue partisan or political or ideological agendas. This is not a time for us to do that, assuming that's part of the normal political process. You know, we've got a public health crisis on our hands. And the economic consequences of this are going to be huge. And that's the reason why, of course, Congress has now passed 3 separate pieces of legislation to help out our healthcare workers who are on the front lines dealing with this virus, and to jumpstart vaccine development, to do clinical trials on potential cures, but also to throw a lifeline to people who, through no fault of their own, aren't seeing any income, and small businesses that are wondering, am I going to be able to keep my doors open until after this virus passes? Mm-hmm. Or these huge employers, like in the hospitality industry, who have good jobs for people, but they just don't have the demand right now, and we need to help them survive. So having said all that, I think infrastructure is a perfectly good thing for us to do, but it does not should not depend on us being in the middle of an emergency to do it. That's something we can take up in regular order. I'm certainly not opposed to it, but I just don't think this is an emergency measure.
Yeah, not an emergency measure at all, as opposed to some of the other things that we could be doing. The jobs numbers that are out today double from what they were last week, which we knew this was going to happen. I think that the administration has been very transparent about this. What do you tell the people out there who see these numbers, some of whom are laid off, some of whom are furloughed, they've lost their jobs entirely because the business just wasn't able to withstand this until the 2 weeks that these checks are coming in? What do you tell individuals about the projection for how we're going to get out of this once we are on the other side of this curve? I know Italy, I think, is kind of now on the descent now. With some of the decreased numbers of fatality and confirmed cases coming in. When the United States gets to that point, Senator, what do you tell individuals out there who are terrified as to what this post-pandemic era in America is going to be like? Where are we going to go? What do you imagine some of the first steps should be taken? What should those steps be? What do you tell them just to kind of not to realistically keep their hopes up?
Well, I think hope is very important, but first I think we need to recognize how depressing and anxiety-provoking this is for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
There are people like members of Congress who are continuing to receive a paycheck when many people have seen their last paycheck for a while, so that's why we had to agree to pass this last bill, which will direct up to $3,400 to a family making up to $150,000 a year. And within 2 weeks of when the president signed the bill, which was last Friday, but then also to beef up unemployment benefits, because many people, again, through no fault of their own, are going to find themselves unemployed for an extended period of time. Hopefully not months, but maybe so, and we need to prepare for that. And once we hit the bottom of this economically, once we've defeated the virus and got it under control, once we've found things that will cure it, a vaccine that will prevent it, then we need to be prepared to have jobs available for people when we come out of this current environment. But it is a tough time. You know, you've got parents home because schools are closed, or dealing with elderly parents. They wondering where their next paycheck is, how they're going to pay their rent. So that's why this is an emergency. That's why the country's on a war footing, and that's why I appreciate the president being so transparent through his daily press conferences with Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci and others about how serious this is and what we're doing to defeat it.
Right. And speaking of that, it was the day before yesterday, Dr. Birx was answering a question, and she had made the remark that one of the reasons why the United States was not as I don't want to use the word prepared, but she had said one of the reasons why the United States wasn't able to get on top of this pandemic as quickly, and it wasn't just the United States, it's every other country. They were going off of the only data available that they had, and that is what communist China wanted to give the world. I mean, they withheld critical data for weeks until finally compelled by the World Health Organization, which they also kind of control. And finally, and even then, that it wasn't entirely accurate. And Dr. Birx was speaking to that just earlier this week. Now, knowing this and seeing the consequence of that, I know that one of your colleagues, Senator Tom Cotton, is discussing legislation as it relates to China. What is there a repercussion in terms of China's malicious handling of this? I know Downing Street has been saying that there would be, I think the phrase used was a reckoning. They're infuriated. The Deputy Prime Minister of Japan was blasting China and the World Health Organization. Senator, where do you think the United States should stand on this, and when?
Well, shame on us if we don't learn the lessons that this virus is trying to teach us. Things like our vulnerabilities to supply chains from China, whether it's manufactured goods or whether it's our medicines or whether it's our personal protective equipment that healthcare providers have to wear, masks and gowns and the like. China is also the source of these viruses. This is at least the second time we've seen these viruses start with animals and then jump to humans, and then of course humans have no immunity to it, so it spreads like wildfire. But to your point about Dr. Birx, I think she did a great public service by laying the blame squarely where it lies, and that is at the feet of the Chinese Communist Party and their desire to try to maintain their reputation in the world, even though they were the cause of this virus and this pandemic. So shame on us if we don't learn the lessons that this virus is trying to teach us and change our ways accordingly, because we simply can't allow this to happen again.
What can be done to incentivize the relocation of our supply chain for not just pharmaceuticals, but for, and I realize this has been such a consumer-driven thing. People want immediate satisfaction. They want affordability. What in the world can be done to incentivize that production, that manufacturing to return to the United States, and for us to be able to control the supply chains of at the very least, things that are critical and deal with national security? And I would actually say that the antibiotics would be one of those.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is one of those learning moments where I think people realize cheap consumer goods don't mean safe. It's maybe not the best thing for themselves or their family or for their country. And so I think we're going to have to learn some of these hard lessons and make some trade-offs. There'd already been some movement of the manufacturing supply chain out of China as a result of some of the tariffs during the trade fight with China that the president has engaged in, that very few other presidents have been willing to engage in. But I think we're going to have to do more here at home, and it may mean things cost more than they would if they were in China, but at least
I'd be happy to pay that.
And we won't. I'm sure we're not talking about huge amounts of money, but certainly when we have to spend $2 trillion in one individual bill, we ought to take that into account and say maybe it's better to spend a little more money up front, protecting our supply chains, rather than have to pass these trillion-dollar spending packages.
Right, exactly. Last quick question for you, Senator. I know that a lot of, because we're in the very beginning of April, we have jobs numbers in, and a lot of small businesses, they're looking at bills they got to pay, families that are affected by this have bills to pay. How is the CARES Act, which is the official name for those who don't know, of the stimulus passed and signed into law last week, how is this going to benefit them now that we're looking at a brand new month and some stuff's coming due?
Well, you're right. There are bills to pay. Those don't go away just because of this pandemic. And that's why the two main things that we did to try to encourage small and large employers to keep their payroll, people on the payroll and paying the benefits as long as possible, is through a loan program, particularly through small businesses, and that goes to cover their payroll and their rent and their operating costs for 2 months, and that will literally be forgiven if they keep people on their payroll. Now, not everybody can do that because they may go under themselves, and so that's where the unemployment insurance benefit expansion plays an important role. But this is a huge challenge from a public health and an economic perspective. We'll get through this, but it's going to be a rough ride here for the next couple of months.
I want to talk to our friend John Rich right now because everybody knows it is Redneck Riviera Fridays. I love the lyrics to this because it's like you saw inside my soul. This bottle's going to be empty by the time this all said and done.
Me too.
I already cleaned out my other one, John. That's we had to, because to help us to get through the pandemic. Goodness, John Rich. Everybody knows my friend John Rich, Redneck Riviera, and that is his new song. I love the cover of it because it's an empty toilet paper roll. Stay home, Big and Rich, stay home, and you can. It's up on if you follow him on social media at John Rich. He's got it as his pinned tweet right up there. How are you doing, my friend? I know you got a house concert tonight that we're going to talk about, but how are you staying sane?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm actually sitting on the stage right now in the house. People say, "Can't believe you got a bar in your house, John." I said, "Well, actually, I got a house in my bar." It's kind of a joke, but it's Big Kenny's coming over, and we're gonna do a full-blown Big and Rich 60 to 70-minute set tonight, live. It's free to watch.
I'm watching.
FoxNation.com, whatever, and that little song you just played, "Stay Home," we'll be playing that song tonight too.
That is awesome, and I love it because that's the anthem for America right now. That is our jam. That's our soundtrack for right now. I think every person has their own theme song, and that is all of our theme songs right now. Is this song?
Well, I was trying to write a public service announcement, and I was going to you know what? I'm going to see if I can come up with something that kind of put a grin on your face and get the message across to stay home, America, stay home. And so I wrote this little chorus, and I played it for a couple of buddies, and they started laughing so hard. They're like, "Dude, we got to finish writing the rest of the song. Let's make it a whole song." I said, "Well, what the hell? There's nothing else going on. Let's write it." So a few days ago, we wrote the song. Big Kenny loved it. We recorded it, and it's being played coast to coast today on country radio and all over the place. And, the point of it is stay home and, let's try to have fun while we are staying at home as much as you can. And to me, Dana, I never thought I'd say this as a songwriter, but the best day in the world is going to be the final day this song ever plays because it won't mean anything after that day. That's the day I'm looking forward to.
There you go, right there. I mean, it is. I mean, that is. I think what the new deadline now is April 30th. Hopefully, we'll all get there and stay sane. Let me ask you this question. I've been asking most everyone this because Easter is coming up. John, are you and your family going to go to Easter in your living room? Are you going in your dining room? I mean, because we're all going to get dressed up to go to a room in our homes. So where are you going to go?
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're going to do. But I tell you what, here's a great thing about God. He does not live in a building.
Amen.
Okay? God does not live in a building, and you can worship God anywhere you want to, anytime you want to. You can talk to him, and he will listen to you, and he will talk back to you anytime, any place. That's what I believe because I know it's a fact.
Well, it is biblical fact.
Yeah. Matter of fact, you might be able to talk to him better now than ever because you are slowed down and maybe a little more still, and maybe you can hear him a little bit better and focus on it even more. Could be the greatest Easter of all time, honestly.
Yeah, and I made the remark to my husband about this when our church announced that they were going to start streaming their services on Sunday, and they were going to start streaming life groups and Bible studies and that. And I thought, look, now we had all been complaining up until this point about social media and how it's been abused. And now look at it. Now it's been taken over. And now I'm like, that's amazing to see. Like, God's got a sense of humor for sure. This, are you worried at all about, I'm sure you are. Everybody's got concerns. I mean, we're cautious, but we're optimistic. What are your thoughts about really you don't want to see the American spirit broken. And I'm concerned that, as we get closer to April 30th, there's a lot of what ifs in my head. Like, what if it's extended longer? You know, we were talking a little bit earlier on the show about how you can't really shut the economy down for that long. Maybe there's like a halfway point that we can meet at where the most vulnerable of our population can be isolated, and the rest of us, we can get to work and do what we need to do. I mean, what are your thoughts on like a halfway point and keeping spirits up despite the fact that we got some pretty crazy jobs numbers coming in?
So what's the thing that causes the most anxiety right now? At least it is for me. Not knowing if you have this or not. Because the study comes out that says 80% of the people that have become sick with COVID-19 were infected by people who were asymptomatic. Yeah. I mean, to me, the next thing I'd like to see happen ASAP, like right now, is mass production of instant test kits where people can be at home and test yourself, your kids, your family members, your grandmother, whoever, and find out who's really positive and who's really negative. Because right now you can't go anywhere because every person you see, you think they might have it. And honestly, you think you might have it. You don't know. And so to me, that's the big anxiety. And you're right. There are hardworking Americans out there everywhere that were raised like I was, which is you never take assistance if you can keep from anybody, much less the government. Right. You just don't do it. But guess what? There's tens of millions of Americans that are either doing that right now or they're going to have to start doing it very, very soon. And so that it can be a spirit breaker. And, you know, another thing I'm concerned about is, you know, we're told there's always going to be food in the grocery store. There's always going to be food. Yeah, but is there always going to be money to buy the food with? Right. You see, I mean, at some point, there was that stimulus package, but that's only going to last so long. It's not going to last a very long time at all. Matter of fact, I don't think it lasts past April 30th for a regular family. So then what? So those are the things that concern me. I'll give you a little insight here. So a country singer, Joe Diffie, yes, who you know well, we're big fans of, you know, he passed away from coronavirus last week. And I'm friends with his wife, and I was speaking with her, and she told me one of the most heartbreaking stories I've ever heard. And that is that when somebody is sick with coronavirus and they're in the hospital, they don't allow any family members back to see them, including if they are terminally ill with it. Meaning if they're dying of the virus, their significant other can't be in the room with them. Right. So they're dying in isolation back there. And so that hit me so wrong that I told myself, I bet you the president doesn't know that's going on. I bet you they don't know that that's actually happening. That's an unintended consequence of this quarantine and taking it all the way down the line like that, even to the final moments of someone's life. And it's not right. And so I actually called the White House. I picked up my phone and I called the people that I know and told them about this story. And I said, it's happening all over the place. And we're not even in the peak yet. So if you guys are talking about 6 figures of people that could pass away, extrapolate that to how much pain and agony that's going to cause for people all around this country. It's not fair and it's not right. And guess what they said? Absolutely, that's not right. And we're going to do something about it. So I'm looking forward to that being fixed as well. I think citizen by citizen, Dana, when we see something that we think we can help, no matter what that is, big level, small level, we should do it right now.
Amen to that. And you see a need, fill a need, be a good steward of your fellow man. Absolutely. And there's so many good stories of this out there, and every single time I see one, every day I see at least 5 or 6 headlines of people banding together to help each other, whether it's truckers who, God love our truckers right now, who are getting our goods to the shelves, and the people who are stocking them, the people in the warehouses that are loading those trucks up. I was reading a story of one truck driver who was trying to get something to eat, and this was a woman who had taken photos with him. They were on Facebook, and this couple had seen that this fast food restaurant that they had stopped at off this major interstate, you couldn't go in for in-room dining. You only had to go up to the drive-through, but if you're not in a car, they don't serve you. And so this truck driver was trying to figure out what to do, and this couple realized it. They ordered for him and made sure he was able to eat. And we got to think about that too, because there's parks that are closing, and some of the roadside truck stops are closing, and a lot of these,
Right.
the in dining at a lot of these establishments that they would stop at. But to see that act of kindness, and then to hear stories about it being repeated all over the country, that's amazing. And I think one of the things that it shows, John, to your point on this, is that despite all of the bickering over politics and everything else, no one was asking what that man's politics were. No one was asking what he believed. They just saw that someone was hungry and they were driving supplies across the country, and they stepped up and made sure that he had what he needed. And I think that's really what it's all about, and that's what's showing.
Yeah, and it's good to see that that's still in the American DNA, regardless of how vicious it gets going back and forth on this political stuff, that when it really gets down to the tough stuff, Americans are still there for each other. Yes, that is an incredible thing to see. This silly little song, Stay Home, there's not a lot of things to laugh at, and we're definitely not laughing at this situation.
Right.
But we wanted to try to write something that would put a grin on your face just for 2.5 minutes and remind you, stay home. Dana, I say this is like the grandma got run over by a reindeer for the coronavirus.
It is.
That's what
My
this song
gosh,
is.
it is. It's totally like that. Oh my gosh, that's that song totally. Now it just hit me, because I'm like, there's a familiar, not melody or anything, but a familiar feeling in the soul about this song, and that's what it is. I wanted to also ask you, because I had a headline about Corona beer. They're not. It's not considered essential in Mexico, but thankfully you can still order Redneck Riviera online, John.
Yep, you can. And matter of fact, redneckriviera.com, I put on the very front page $8 off. There's a coupon that's a digital coupon. We're in 10,000 stores now across America. Redneckriviera.com has a store locator. You put in your zip code and you find a store. I own the brand, so I said, man, knock a bunch of money off of it. Make it as affordable as possible. It's only like $25 as it is. So we're knocking off another $8 off these bottles. And, it comes down to decisions, right? So I was having to make a decision today. I was like, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do, guys? I don't know. How bad is it? See you later.
Judge it. That's a good measurement. How bad is it? Let's see, cup or bottle? I don't know. And I want to remind people too that even though, we have fun about it, and it is a great tasting whiskey, by the way, this benefits Folds of Honor, and you've provided so many scholarships through the sale of Redneck Riviera to the children of our fallen heroes. And how many scholarships is it now?
Redneck Riviera Whiskey's now funded over 100 college scholarships. And one thing I'm glad you brought that up, is that the Folds of Honor is seeing a drastic decrease, obviously, in donations because of what's going on in our country. So, if you don't feel like you can write them a check right now and donate to Folds of Honor, products like mine still allow you to do that, and you're getting something for it that you probably want anyway. Tonight I'm going to be live streaming with Big Kenny right here at my house, foxnation.com. It's free to watch. You don't have to pay anything. It's going to be on all their platforms. And we'll be having a little Redneck Riviera whiskey. We're going to sing Save a Horse, Ride a Cowboy. We're going to do all the fun stuff tonight. 7 o'clock Central.
Congressman, I hope that you're well. I hope your family's well, and that you're staying relatively sane during the time of this pandemic. How have you been since last week?
I'm recovering from being the most hated man in Washington, D.C. We received death threats both on me and at my house, so that wasn't fun. But we'll get past this. Sometimes it's not popular when you stand up for the Constitution. I thought it would have been a bad idea to pass a bill in the House of Representatives with nobody there except for Nancy Pelosi. And yet that's what they were going to do. I stopped them from doing it in an empty chamber. I was able to force half of Congress to show up. But they did deny me the recorded vote. That's never happened in 7.5 years.
That's the voice vote that you wanted.
Yep.
Yeah.
I wanted a recorded vote. They did a voice vote that wasn't recorded, and what I wanted them to do was to go on a roll call, which, by the way, takes 15 minutes. They said it would delay the bill. It only takes 15 minutes. And to your point, you mentioned some of the pork in this bill. I think we should declare war on the virus, not on the taxpayer. This bill is a massive transfer of wealth from the taxpayer to the super rich. If you count the $4 trillion in the Federal Reserve's part of this bill, it's a $6 trillion stimulus package. divide that by 100 million families, that's $60,000 of money per family that's either going to get spent or loaned out or printed, yet each family may get only $3,000 from this. Where does the other 95% go? It's a redistribution of wealth.
Right, and I think that was, for a lot of conservatives out there, for a lot of people, independents, libertarians, that was a huge concern that we all had with this bill. And we know that this is a very historic, unprecedented time. That, I mean, we really are in uncharted waters. We don't have any kind of a blueprint from which to operate. And I've been talking to people for the past couple of weeks about the difference between the regular bailouts that we saw with the too big to fail era and this, because I think it's fair to say, Congressman, that it's kind of like some sort of financial eminent domain where you have the government, due to a pandemic, that is shutting down commerce, thereby, I guess, and I'm really stretching this word, sort of confiscating your ability to generate revenue, to pay salaries. And so how else are we expected to operate in this? Your thoughts?
That's a great analogy. It is like eminent domain. This is a taking. Here's the problem, though. The governors, the state governors are taking. They're the ones who are shutting down their respective economies. And then it's the federal government who is trying to make people whole for the taking that happened by the governors. The problem is we're encouraging and enabling the governors to do more of this. Now, in some states, I think the governor's reactions may have been appropriate, but in Kentucky, for instance, they've killed our economy. And it's, the virus is not that prevalent. I think there was some middle ground we could have taken where you go to work and you wear a mask or something, instead of just shutting everything down. And so I do agree that, the government has taken something from people with their overreaction. But when the federal government pays for what the state government does wrongly, we're just encouraging more bad behavior. And I think we should get the economy going again. Let's look, like you said, we don't have a plan. Let's look at a plan for getting the economy going again. Because here's the thing, spring only comes once a year. The farmers right now need to be plowing and planting their fields and fertilizing that. And if we miss that opportunity, the suffering that's going to come from shutting down our economy, think about the people who may not be making insulin at the factories. Think about the people who aren't getting those elective procedures done. I want the most compassionate solution. And I'm afraid that shutting down our entire economy and sending people checks is not the compassionate or sustainable solution.
Well, the insulin, I think, might be something that is, I think, declared an essential, although I don't know how in depth. I remember reading the bill, but now I read the bill, but now I'm trying to recall the 1,000 some odd pages of this bill and what it included. Two things that I wanted to bring up with you, because this is what I heard a lot from our listeners, and we have a lot of folks from Kentucky as well as elsewhere from across the country. And I want to really quickly get back to the vote, but then I want to talk to you about what that plan could look like, and I want to ask you your thoughts as to China as well and supply chain. But first off, one of the things that I had heard from listeners is that they understand the recording of the voice vote. And they were questioning the cost of flying, of members of Congress all flying out to D.C. and doing the vote that way, if that was cost conscious, if that was consistent. And also, was everybody practicing social distancing? That was something else that people brought up. How do you address that when people bring that up with you in response to or in context of your vote?
Well, in terms of the cost of flying to D.C., that comes from our congressional budgets, and people pretty much spend all of that before the end of the year. So it's not like we got more money in the budget for that to fly there. Also, we were supposed to be in session this week. This was money that was already budgeted, all of that travel. In terms of keeping people safe, I had an argument with Nancy Pelosi on the floor of the House. She said, "You're going to force me to bring everybody in here for a quorum." And I said, "No, Madam Speaker, if you allow for the recorded vote, then people can come in 10 at a time, 30 at a time, and vote and leave, and we won't need to test whether there's a quorum here or not."
Yeah, and see, so that not to interrupt you, but that brings me to the thought that I had, because how is this? And I realize again, and I want to reemphasize that we are in uncharted waters, but how is it that there wasn't a plan by either Nancy Pelosi or ultimately even Senator Mitch McConnell to to set up some sort of process for some kind of remote voting in the event that something like this happened. I don't even know how you would begin to address that in Congress, but what is your take?
We should have remote voting. Look, they used to have a plan for putting congressmen in a mountain and keeping them safe. Now they don't even have a plan for us to vote if a virus hits, right? It's ridiculous. But I'll tell you why Kevin McCarthy and Nancy Pelosi, neither of them want to do remote voting. You can't twist somebody's arm unless they're physically
right
present. If you're going to offer them something, whisper something, hey, I'll give you this if you do that. If you're trying to change their vote at the last second, they do a lot of that on the floor. That's why we still vote in person. Even when we're in D.C., we could vote from our offices. We have electronic voting cards. They can't twist arms. And here's the other reason they don't want to do remote voting, Dana. What's the argument to have a voice vote if remote voting is just as easy as a voice vote, right? We would just remote, and then everybody would be on record, because that was what the whole struggle, and they vilified me last week. They said I would delay the bill. It turns out I didn't delay it even by a minute. The bill signing happened on time. But it was all about, they were trying to avoid accountability for the biggest bill in mankind, the biggest spending bill that human history has ever seen. And they fought to stay off the record, because this may end up being the next TARP, that really people will be upset about as time passes on.
Well, I just keep looking at some of the figures, like the money that went to the Kennedy Center, for instance. I know everyone likes to use that as an example, but what they don't mention is the multi-million-dollar endowment that place has. I mean, I understand that there are certain Article 1, Section 8 gets into what Congress can and cannot spend money on, and the Kennedy Center was something that was crafted congressionally, and there's a history there. However, they had a multi-million-dollar endowment, which poses the question as to should they have even received additional taxpayer dollars. And there's all sorts of examples of millions of dollars that went to, like public radio and all of this other stuff that could have gone to PPEs for our healthcare providers, those who are on the front line there. And I think that those questions are legitimate. I know the president was quite angry at you. Have you spoken with the president? Have you guys kind of buried the hatchet, or where does that stand?
Well, first of all, let me get to what you said. What should have been this bill is like a Manhattan Project, a war on the virus, okay? PPEs, the ventilators, the tests, not just the one test, but the antigen tests. Let's give an X prize for somebody who can test for $10. Let's fund everybody being tested. That would have only cost a percentage of what this bill costs. So that's what we should have done in this bill. And by the way, Nancy said all those things that you mentioned that were in the bill, she said those are just a down payment. She's already talking about a fourth
they're
bill.
eyeing the fourth wave. Oh, yeah. You may have to go through all of this again, Congressman.
Well, see, here's the thing. The Democrats know that I will drag them through this again if they try it again. They got up and said this is a down payment. Well, now they know there's at least one congressman that's going to stand up and quote the Constitution. These aren't even House rules. People are saying, oh, you were a parliamentary, stickler. No, this is the Constitution that says the majority has to vote or be present, right? Mm-hmm. And they didn't want to do either. So what I have done, I believe, is strengthens Trump's hand in the negotiation on the fourth bill. Otherwise, Nancy Pelosi could pass that bill today.
Was that intentional to strengthen his hand on that if they attempt a fourth wave?
My intention was to uphold the Constitution, right, and in a way that wouldn't weaken the president's hand, that wouldn't weaken the bill. I told my leadership in advance I was going to do this. I could have snuck up there and objected, and they would have been in the lurch because they had told people, they were trying to tell people not to come. And I was telling them, no, you should come because I'm going to do this. So anyways, I think I can patch it up with the president. I've already called back the White House and left a message. I remind people that the president said the same things about Mark Meadows and toward Mark Meadows when he voted against the health care bill.
Is there a way to stand outside the Oval Office window with a boombox above your head, and say anything? I don't know. Without getting tackled by Secret Service. I mean, it may come to that because we also, because obviously I'm sure you're thinking of how your voters are. It's weird right now because we're in the middle of a pandemic and I understand that everyone is rushing and is concerned to do the correct thing. and that some of these political lines, even within the Republican Party, can come up. But are you worried about the prospect of maybe not repairing that association?
Well, it's I had a relatively easy re-election here in my primary, and I've thrown that up and breathed a little bit of life into my opponent's campaign, which people say I did this for political purposes. This hurt me politically. Trust me. To have the president tweet against you 3 times in a row is not good in a district where the president has a 90+% approval rating. So, but here's the good news, Dana. Unsolicited, I've received 3,000 donations in the last 5 days to my online website, because the people across the country want to see somebody who will fight. They know something's up. They know something's wrong with this bill. They know it's not sustainable. They know it's a taste of socialism. And so they've been supporting me at thomasmassie.com, and that keeps me going. And it might mean I can win my reelection, but if I lose it, I will know that I stood on principle. But if I lose it, the reason I'm trying to win it is I don't want this to be an example of where one guy stands up against the crowd and then he's gone, and then the swamp wins. So I'm trying to beat the swamp.
I've never felt that there was any problem with being, even during a crisis like this, always questioning the fiscal decisions that are going to go towards dealing with preparation and dealing with response to something like this. And even if it is during a time of pandemic, I hope that conservatives don't forget that sometimes that's when you need to examine it the most. Do you feel that you were unfairly given a bad rap in all of this? Because there were a lot of your Republican colleagues that were coming out and discussing this. But I also think that in a way, because of this, people were really paying attention to the amount of pork that was in this that was not going towards the pandemic.
That's why there's so much hate directed at the one person who stands up, because I think the news cycle would have already moved on. They wouldn't be re-examining this bill if it had been totally unanimous, and that's why they're so mad at me. Now, my colleagues are mad at me because they said that they shouldn't have to go to work, that traveling would endanger them.
Well, but they can have people on the front lines there in the grocery store stocking shelves, and people who are doctors and nurses. They're better than the doctors and nurses.
That's what they were saying, and I thought, that's ridiculous. You all make $174,000 a year and have some of the best health care in the United States, and you're telling the truckers to stay on the road, but you won't come to D.C. And, in the early days of this country, people had to ride on horseback to get to Congress, and sometimes through hot wars.
Maybe we should go back to that, just as a reminder.
Yeah, you got to ride a horse. Well, I think the people from Hawaii would be upset with that.
They would be upset. Well, just put it on a boat and then ride it. No, we're running out of time really quickly. But Congressman, I wanted to ask you really quickly before we leave. Now that the media is being forced to report on China's malicious handling and really ultimately kicking off this pandemic, your thoughts really quickly on some of should they face a reckoning? What should be done? I know we got to get our supply chain over here. Your thoughts very quickly as we have a minute left.
Yeah, I think our oversight committee should have hearings on our supply chain, particularly our medical supply chain. I've joined Chip Roy in calling on the chairwoman to have those hearings. I think any of the data that we get from China right now is completely unreliable. I wouldn't trust it at all in terms of planning our own response. And most of all, let's don't turn into China. Let's don't turn into like dictatorships. The governors are becoming they're crushing our liberties.
Right.
I think we shouldn't emulate sort of the totalitarian governments. Let's have some faith in the free market. Let's do what's great about America, right?
Exactly.
Let's have some innovation.
We have to get going, unfortunately. Congressman Thomas Massie, appreciate your time today from the beautiful state of Kentucky.